Thank you so much for that warm welcoming. Good morning, everyone, to those on the West Coast, and good afternoon to my fellow East Coasters. My name is Jessica Presley McAllister, and I am the Pharmacy Compounding National Expert for the FDA. Today, I have the pleasure to present to you regarding FDA inspections of outsourcing facilities, and I will touch upon the regulations that pertain to outsourcing facilities, as well as our inspectional approach as FDA investigators. Outsourcing facilities are not exempt and must comply with CGMP requirements. Within the draft guidance titled Current Good Manufacturing Practices Guidance for Human Drug Compounding, outsourcing facilities under Section 503B of the FD&C Act, which when finalized will be our agency's current thinking of compliance with CGMP requirements for 503B facilities. Unless a specific exemption applies, any drug that is not made in compliance with CGMP requirements will be considered adulterated under the law, FD&C Act Section 501A2B. Continuing on with CGMPs for outsourcing facilities. As an agency, we do recognize the difference between compounding outsourcing facilities and conventional drug manufacturers, and the need, to some extent, to appropriately tailor CGMP requirements for outsourcing facilities while maintaining the minimum standards necessary to protect patients from the risks of contaminated or otherwise substandard compounded drug products. Our evaluation of compliance with CGMP requirements by outsourcing facility does include assessing conformance with minimum standards, identifying conditions that may pose a significant risk to a patient's safety. Moving into insanitary conditions, outsourcing facilities are subject to the prohibition on insanitary conditions. Within the FD&C Act, specifically Section 501A2A, states that a drug is deemed to be adulterated if it has been prepared, packed, or held under an insanitary condition whereby it may have become contaminated with filth or rendered injurious to a patient's health. The insanitary conditions prohibition applies to all facilities regardless of its type. Now the fun begins. The FDA investigator is at your outsourcing facility. What do? Well, me personally, I'd like to start with the initial facility walkthrough. Why is this so important? Well, it's an opportunity for me to observe conditions as they actually are and to identify any obvious issues. This will dictate my inspectional approach for the rest of the inspection. What are some of the red flags that I've observed in the initial facility walkthrough? I've observed visible signs of filth, dirt, mold, insects, and even trash inside the ISO 5 environment. I've observed aseptic manipulations being conducted outside of the ISO 5 environment. I've observed improper material flow throughout the facility, as well as minimal or no record-keeping systems. One of the principles of CGMPs is that if a procedure, whether it be a cleaning and disinfecting procedure or even a procedure for deviations, if those deviations were not documented, then there is no assurance that that investigation was ever conducted. Moving into aseptic operators and operations. Why is this so important? Well, unqualified personnel and their actions can introduce contamination into the best designed and otherwise well-maintained facilities. Typically, the dirtiest items in a room are personnel, and it is important to understand that even sterile commercial product can become non-sterile when it is handled inadequately. What are some of the red flags that we've observed in aseptic operations? Well, we've seen improper aseptic gowning techniques, materials that are not being cleaned and sanitized prior to being entered into the ISO 5 environment. Poor aseptic technique, the operator was blocking first pass air. Items in the clean room that have not been cleaned and disinfected. And filters used to render a product sterile are not pharmaceutical grade. We have observed many times in outsourcing facilities where firms are not using pharmaceutical grade filters. And this is easily verified by consulting the package insert associated with the filter. It provides the specifications of the filter itself and the requirements for filter integrity testing, such as a bubble point test. Moving into process and facility design. Why is this so important? Well, normal environmental conditions are not suitable for aseptic processing of sterile drug products. The regulation that applies to process and facility design can be found in 21 CFR 21142B, and it states, the flow of components, drug product containers, closures, and labeling, or even in-process materials and drug products itself through the building or buildings shall be designed to prevent any sort of contamination. Cross-contamination, something you do not want in your outsourcing facility. Within our draft guidance, we state that powdered drugs are handled. If they are handled, procedures must be established and followed to appropriately manage cross-contamination risk. It's particularly important if the powder is cytotoxic or highly sensitizing. As an agency, we recommend the physical segregation of areas in which powdered drugs are exposed to its environment. And for penicillin products, a separate facility is required. This can be found in 21 CFR 21142D. And again, all of this is referenced in the Current Good Manufacturing Practice Draft Guidance for human drug compounding of an outsourcing facility under Section 503B of the FD&C Act. What are some of the red flags that we've observed in process and facility design? Well, we've observed a lack of air control systems, loose cleanroom ceiling tiles, damaged or dirty HEPA filters, disinfectants and cleaning agents used in the ISO 5 environment were determined to be not sterile, and surfaces within the clean room themselves were not able to be cleaned and adequately sanitized. Additional citations that we can use under process and facility design include 21 CFR 21146, and that states that equipment for adequate control over air pressure, microorganisms, dust, humidity, and temperature shall be provided when appropriate for the manufacturing, packing, processing, and holding of a drug product. Within the aseptic processing guidance, it states that proper design and control prevents turbulence and stagnant air within the critical area. The aseptic processing guidance also states that materials of construction in the clean room ensures the ease of cleaning and sanitization. The floors, walls, ceilings should be constructed of a smooth, hard surface that can be adequately cleaned and sanitized. Ceilings and associated HEPA filter banks should be designed to protect the sterile materials from any source of contamination. And clean rooms also should not contain any unnecessary equipment, fixtures, or other materials. Moving into environmental and personnel monitoring. Why is this so critical? Well, sterility tests alone do not provide an adequate assurance of drug product sterility. And this is very important. Quality is built in and not tested in. What are the regulations that apply to environmental and personnel monitoring? Well, under 21 CFR 21142 C10.4, it states that control systems to prevent contamination during aseptic processing include a system for monitoring environmental conditions. A vigilant and responsive personnel monitoring program should be established. This is referenced in the aseptic processing guidance for industry. It's important to evaluate the quality of air and surfaces in the cleanroom environment, and that should start with a well-defined written program with scientifically sound methodologies. The monitoring program should cover all production shifts, and that includes the air, floors, walls, and equipment surfaces, including the critical surfaces that come in direct contact with product, container, and closures. Moving into pressure differential limits. Pressure differential limits must be established, and that is in accordance with 21 CFR 21142. It also states that control systems should include built-in alarms to detect excursions. Monitoring for pressure differential, humidity, and temperature should occur during production operations, and prompt action should be taken to correct inappropriate conditions. Within the CGMP draft guidance for outsourcing facilities, it states that if a problem occurs, whether it be pressure differentials, temperature, or humidity, and it cannot be immediately corrected, production should stop until the problem is corrected. It also states that monitoring procedures should require documentation and investigation of any instances in which there is a loss of positive pressure within the clean rooms during actual production, and the lots affected and corrective action should be promptly taken. So what are the red flags that we see with environmental and personnel monitoring? Well, we observe during our inspections infrequent environmental monitoring. We observe adverse trends in environmental monitoring. We see environmental monitoring that is not representative of production operations. Also, getting back to trending in environmental monitoring, it can mean different things. It could be pressure differential trending or an increase in microbial counts. And it's important to understand that we as an agency know that you will have issues at times within your facility, but it's important for us to assess, as well as your quality unit, of how you address these issues and what corrective and preventative actions you put in place to mitigate this from reoccurring. Product inspection and component control. Why is this so important? Well, contaminants and impurities in ingredients can end up in your finished drug product. Breaches in the container closure system can lead to product contamination or even degradation. So what are some of the regulations that apply to component control? Well, under 21 CFR 211, 82, 84, 87, and 113 state that controls over the source and quality of components are required. When producing sterile drug products, an aspect of such control is the consideration of whether the incoming components start as non-sterile. In accordance with the draft guidance for CGMPs and outsourcing facilities, for sterile drug products that are filter sterilized, pre-filtration bioburden and endotoxin limits should be established and measured prior to sterile filtration. A pharmaceutical sterilizing grade filter should be used, and filter integrity testing should be conducted after each filtration or production run. For sterile drug products that are not subject to an overkill terminal sterilization cycle, pre-filtration bioburden limits should be established and measured prior to filtration. Acceptance of incoming lots of non-sterile components includes water, must include microbial and endotoxin testing, and that is in accordance with 21 CFR 211-84D6. And our agency does not intend to take action against an outsourcing facility regarding this testing if the water is purchased and certified as sterile and non-pyrogenic and is accompanied by a valid certificate of analysis. It's important that components must be retested or re-examined for identity, strength, quality, and purity after long periods of storage or exposure to air, heat, or any other conditions that may adversely affect the component itself. However, additional testing is unnecessary if each lot of components is stored under the supplier's labeled storage conditions, used within the supplier's label retest or expiration dating, and protected from contamination when portions of the lot become removed. Again, all of this is captured in the draft guidance, current good manufacturing practices for human drug compounding of outsourcing facilities under Section 503B of the FD&C Act. Continuing on with container closures and equipment. If an outsourcing facility does not use pre-sterilized and depyrogenated single-use disposable equipment, that could be your filters, your transfer tubing, your temporary holding vessels, those pieces of equipment must be sterilized and depyrogenated before use, and the processes used to render sterile and depyrogenated must be validated. That's in accordance with 21 CFR 211, 65, 67A and B, 100, and 113. Typically, in my experience, I've observed firms that will purchase and use pre-sterilized and depyrogenated single-use equipment and pre-sterilized and depyrogenated containers. However, some firms may sterilize equipment, containers, and closures at their facility. And these product contact services are extremely critical to a product's sterility assurance. Again, all of this is outlined in the guidance for human drug compounding of outsourcing facilities under Section 503B of the FD&C Act. What are some of the red flags that we've observed with product inspection and component control? Well, we've observed visible contamination in the form of floaters, particles, discoloration, and leaking of the finished drug product. We've observed containers not being suitable for its intended use. We've observed bulk drug substances that are not suitable for drug manufacturing. So, for example, they do not conform to applicable USB or NF monographs, and they lack a valid certificate of analysis. Other examples we've observed are leaks or damaged stoppers, stock solutions that are being stored in mason jars, using syringes that are intended for immediate use, and instead the firms are using them for long-term storage, where leaching becomes an issue with the syringe stopper, which can result in degradation of the active pharmaceutical ingredient, and the finished drug product may be subpotent. Packaging and labeling controls. Why is this so important? Well, we want to ensure that mislabeling of drug products do not occur. We want to ensure that product mix-ups do not occur. There's a potential for serious patient harm when a product is incorrectly labeled. Mislabeling includes products being mislabeled as to the incorrect strength or even the wrong product itself. We've had 2 examples of recalls in the past due in part to mislabeling. Infants were injected with a mislabeled drug regarding its strength. They were administered a more potent drug, which led to severe adverse events. Continuing on with packaging and labeling controls, the regulation that applies is 21 CFR 211-122A, and it states there shall be written procedures describing in sufficient detail the receipt, the identification, storage, handling, sampling, examination, and/or testing of labeling and packaging materials, and these written procedures shall be followed. Labeling and packaging materials shall be representatively sampled and examined or tested upon receipt and before use in any packaging and labeling operations at your facility. According to the CGMP guidance for outsourcing facilities, labels must contain required information, and labeling operations must include controls to prevent mix-ups, and furthermore, procedures must be developed to ensure these requirements are met. And it also is in accordance with 21 CFR 211, 125, 130, and 134. What are some of the red flags that we've observed with packaging and labeling control operations? Well, we've observed product containers that are not immediately labeled. We've also observed multiple types of products being compounded in a single clean room without adequate segregation of products and associated labeling. Lastly, moving into records review. Why is this so important? Well, documentation of key quality controls such as release testing or environmental monitoring are critical. It shows how a facility is able to identify and address problems that arise. Some of the red flags that we observe in record review. Overall, there could be a lack of records at a facility. The firm lacks investigations into out-of-specification results. The facilities also lack a valid certificate of analysis. We've observed multiple complaints regarding adverse events or product quality issues, and we've also observed potential data integrity concerns, whether that be through manipulation of data or poor documentation practices. So the top 5 483 citations that we cite on an FDA 483 during our inspections. So from January of 2018 to present day, these are the top 5, okay? So starting with number 1, it's under environmental monitoring systems, which is captured in 21 CFR 211-42 C10-4. And it states aseptic processing areas are deficient regarding the system for monitoring environmental conditions. Number 2, procedures for sterile drug products, captured under 21 CFR 211-113B. It states that procedures designed to prevent microbial contamination of drug products purporting to be sterile are not established, written, or even followed. Number 3, investigations of discrepancies or a failure of a batch is captured under 21 CFR 211-192, and it states that there is a failure to thoroughly review any unexplained discrepancies, the failure of a batch, or any of its components to meet any of its specifications, whether or not the batch has already been distributed. Number 4, under the cleaning system, captured in 21 CFR 211-42C10-5. It states that aseptic processing areas are deficient regarding the system for cleaning and disinfecting the room, the equipment to produce aseptic conditions. And lastly, number 5, the validation is lacking for sterile drug products, which is captured under 21 CFR 211-113B, and it states that procedures designed to prevent microbial contamination of drug products purporting to be sterile did not include adequate validation of the aseptic sterilization processes. I just want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to our inspectional approach as FDA investigators when we inspect your outsourcing facilities. I will now turn it over to my colleague, Lori Canton, to discuss with you Section 503B, Compliance Evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lori Canton, and I'm the Branch Chief for Branch 3 in the Office of Compounding Quality and Compliance within CDER's Office of Compliance. My presentation today will focus on FDA's inspectional approach as it relates to the conditions of Section 503B. Under Section 503B of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, or FDCA, an outsourcing facility is a facility that elects to register as an outsourcing facility, complies with all the conditions of Section 503B, is engaged in the compounding of sterile human drugs, is inspected by FDA on a risk-based schedule, and lastly, a key point for outsourcing facilities is that they may or may not obtain prescriptions for identified individual patients. As some of you may already know, the human drug products compounded by outsourcing facilities are eligible for exemptions from requirements under 3 sections of the FDCA, and these 3 sections are the new drug approval requirements in Section 505, labeling with adequate directions for use in Section 502F1, and drug supply chain security requirements in Section 582. In order for an outsourcing facility to be eligible for these exemptions, drug products must be compounded in accordance with Section 503B. During the inspection of an outsourcing facility, we'll evaluate the facility to ensure that all drug products produced are compounded in accordance with Section 503B. One important thing to remember is that drugs compounded by an outsourcing facility are not eligible for the exemptions provided under Section 503A. However, this does not mean that drug products can't be produced pursuant to patient-specific prescriptions at an outsourcing facility. It just means that all drug products compounded by an outsourcing facility, even patient-specific drug products, must be compounded in accordance with Section 503B and CGMPs. If a firm chooses to also compound drug products under the different conditions of Section 503A, then this must be done in a separate establishment. 503A, or traditional pharmacy compounding operations, must be completely segregated from the outsourcing facility. For example, this means that the 2 types of operations do not share rooms and fixed equipment or supplies. They must have separate entrances and exits. They do not share an internal pass-through opening, and that the areas are separated by permanent physical barriers. As part of our evaluation of a facility, we will also confirm the address that was registered with FDA as an outsourcing facility and confirm it is the actual location where 503B compounding operations occur. And we will confirm that the outsourcing facility's drug product labels clearly identify the outsourcing facility as the producer of the drug product. Before we delve into the specific conditions of 503B, I have a couple of important notes regarding the facility evaluation. First, if any 503 operations are not completely segregated from the 503B operations, we consider the 503A operations to be part of the outsourcing facility and therefore subject to the conditions of Section 503B and CGMP requirements. However, please recall that outsourcing facilities are not precluded from compounding drugs based on the receipt of prescriptions for identified individual patients. But in order for an outsourcing facility to be eligible for the exemptions in Section 503B, all drug products that are compounded at the registered outsourcing facility location must be compounded in accordance with Section 503B and GMPs, regardless of whether there is a patient-specific prescription or not. Secondly, for firms that are a Section 510 registered manufacturer and a registered outsourcing facility, the compounded drug products must meet the conditions of Section 503B. Both approved drug products and drug products compounded under Section 503B may be produced in the same facility. Another area that we will evaluate during the inspection is compliance with the requirement that compounding at an outsourcing facility must be by or under the direct supervision of a licensed pharmacist. We will also verify that the outsourcing facility has a licensed pharmacist providing oversight of compounding operations. We will collect information regarding the role of pharmacists in the operation, such as the number of pharmacists employed, pharmacist licensure information, the hours they are on site, and whether a pharmacist is present during compounding operations. We will also collect documents such as copies of pharmacist licenses. An outsourcing facility inspection will also focus on a firm's compliance with specific conditions set forth in Section 503B. In the next slides, I will go into more detail regarding the compliance evaluation of these conditions. The first condition I would like to discuss is drug product reporting. Section 503B requires outsourcing facilities to electronically submit a report about the drug products compounded at the facility, initially upon registration as an outsourcing facility, and twice a year in June and December. Please note that even if no drugs are compounded during the reporting period, the outsourcing facility must still submit a report stating that no drug products were compounded during the applicable reporting period. The drug product report must identify all drugs compounded during the reporting period, even if they are not distributed. This includes all sterile and non-sterile drugs and includes patient-specific drugs too. Prior to an inspection of an outsourcing facility, we will verify whether or not the firm has submitted the required product reports. During the inspection, we will review the drug product reports that the outsourcing facility has submitted, and we will collect documents such as a complete drug production log to verify that the facility has properly reported all drugs compounded during the corresponding reporting period. If during the inspection we find any deficiencies in product reporting practices, this may be documented as an observation on the 483 that is issued to the firm at the close of the inspection. Adverse drug reporting and adverse drug reporting procedures is another important condition that will be evaluated during an inspection. Under Section 503B, outsourcing facilities must submit adverse event reports to FDA in accordance with the content and format requirements established through guidance or regulation under Section 310.305 of Title 21 CFR. Outsourcing facilities must electronically report all serious and unexpected adverse drug experiences associated with the use of their compounded drug products. We strongly recommend that outsourcing facilities report all serious adverse drug experiences associated with their compounded drug products. Reporting all serious adverse drug experiences, whether expected or unexpected, provides important information about potential product quality issues or public health risks associated with drug products compounded by outsourcing facilities. Section 310.305 requires that outsourcing facilities report adverse drug experiences received or otherwise obtained that are both serious and unexpected as soon as possible, but in no case later than 15 calendar days of initial receipt of the information, along with a copy of the drug product's current labeling. The regulation also requires establishment and maintenance of records for 10 years of all adverse drug experiences required to be reported. When we conduct an inspection, we'll determine if the outsourcing facility has received any adverse event reports since the date of the last inspection or since the date of initial registration, whichever is most recent. We will also obtain copies of all adverse event reports received, and we will determine if the outsourcing facility submitted adverse events to FDA in accordance with 21 CFR 310.305. Additionally, we will determine if the outsourcing facility has adequate written processes for the surveillance, receipt, evaluation, and reporting of adverse events for the drug products it compounds, and we will request copies of adverse event and complaint SOPs, or standard operating procedures. We will attempt to collect copies of these SOPs early during the inspection so that we may review them and provide feedback regarding any observed deficiencies during the inspection closeout discussion. If we find that a firm failed to submit an adverse drug event report within 15 days of receipt, we may document that deficiency as an observation on the 483. With respect to drug product labeling, Section 503B requires that OFs label their drugs in containers with specific information. During the inspection, we will obtain copies of a random sample of drug product labels and container labeling for approximately 10 to 15 products. We'll review the labels and labeling to determine whether or not all the required labeling elements are present. In order to facilitate our review of drug product labels and containers, it is helpful for outsourcing facilities to identify for the investigator which labels are to be placed on the drug product and which labeling is for the container. Photos of finished labeled products are also helpful for our evaluation of the labels. If any labeling deficiencies are identified, they may be documented as an observation on the 483. Another condition of Section 503B is that an OF cannot compound drugs that appear on the list of drugs that have been withdrawn or removed from the market because the drug products or components of the drug products have been found to be unsafe or not effective. So during the inspection, we will review and collect documents such as a complete drug product list and drug production log, and we will also review the biannual drug product report submitted to FDA in order to evaluate compliance with this condition. If indicated, other documents may also be collected, such as batch records and shipping records. If we observe that a firm compounds drug products that have been withdrawn or removed from the market, this deficiency may be documented as an observation on the 483. With respect to the bulk drug substances condition under Section 503B, the bulk drug substances that outsourcing facilities can use in compounding is limited to bulks that are used to compound drugs that appear on FDA's drug shortage list, or bulks that appear on a list developed by FDA of bulk drug substances for which there is a clinical need, known as the 503B bulks list. At this time, FDA does not intend to take action against an outsourcing facility for compounding a drug using a bulk drug substance that does not appear on the 503B bulks list and that is not used to compound a drug that appears on the FDA drug shortage list at the time of compounding, distribution, and dispensing, provided that certain conditions are met, including that the bulk drug substance appears on the 503B Category 1 list, which is available on FDA's website, and also the drug product compounded using the bulk drug substance is compounded in compliance with all other provisions of Section 503B. In addition to those conditions, bulk drug substances used in compounding must be accompanied by a valid certificate of analysis. They have to be manufactured by an establishment registered with FDA under Section 510 of the FD&C, and they must comply with an applicable USP or NF monograph if one exists. As part of the inspection, we will review all drug products produced from bulk drug substances to determine if the bulk drug substances used are eligible for use in compounding under Section 503B. We'll collect certificates of analysis for each bulk drug substance to determine if each one is accompanied by a valid certificate of analysis, and we'll review those certificates to determine if each bulk drug substance was manufactured by an establishment registered with FDA under Section 510. We'll also check to see if there are SOPs or processes in place to ensure compliance with the bulk drug substance condition. And if indicated, we may also collect other documents such as batch records, shipping records, and invoices. If the outsourcing facility compounds drugs using bulk drug substances that are ineligible for use in compounding under Section 503B, we may document this as an observation on the 483. Under Section 503B, an outsourcing facility may not compound a drug that is essentially a copy of one or more approved drugs. This slide contains the definition of a compounded drug that is considered to be essentially a copy of an approved drug. Please note that FDA does not intend to take action against an outsourcing facility regarding this provision if it fills orders for a compounded drug that is essentially a copy of an approved drug that has been discontinued for reasons other than lack of safety or effectiveness and is no longer marketed. In order to assess compliance with the copies condition during the inspection, we will review drug production logs and drug product reports to identify potential copies, and if any potential copies are identified, we will bring them to the firm's attention for discussion. We may also collect other documents related to potential copies, such as batch records, prescriptions, purchase orders, product and container labels, invoices, shipping records, and documentation of a provider's clinical difference determination. If it appears that an outsourcing facility is compounding drug products that are essentially a copy, FDA may cite this deficiency as an observation on the 483. Lastly, the prohibition on wholesaling is a condition of 503B that we will also evaluate during the inspection. Section 503B prohibits the wholesaling of compounded drugs and states that compounded drugs will not be sold or transferred by an entity other than the outsourcing facility that compounded such drug. During the inspection, we will determine whether the drug products made are distributed to an entity other than a healthcare entity, healthcare practitioner, or patient. In order to evaluate compliance with the wholesaling condition, we will review and collect documents such as drug orders, sales invoices, customer lists, and distribution and shipping records. In summary, I would just like to note that during the inspection, we will make a preliminary determination regarding 503B compliance. Following the inspection and our review of the facility's response to the 483 and the Establishment Inspection Report, known as the EIR, we will make a final determination of 503B compliance. Regulatory action, if indicated, will be determined based on this evaluation in conjunction with the evaluation of CGMP compliance. I hope my presentation today has clarified for you how FDA is evaluating an outsourcing facility's compliance with Section 503B during an inspection. Thank you for your attention, and please stay tuned for our panel discussion and Q&A session.
Thank you both for the great presentations. We'll now transition into our Q&A session. If you haven't had a chance to enter your questions into the Q&A chat pod, please do so now. We'll answer as many questions as time allows, and we have quite a few coming in. Looks like we've got a few coming in for Jessica McAllister as our first panelist up. And here is the first question for Ms. McAllister. What can OFs expect as we return to on-site inspection since COVID? Should it be the same length or more focused?
Thank you for that excellent question. So as an agency, we return to routine on-site inspections on July 1st, 2021. And at this current time for compounding inspections, we are not conducting virtual audits. But prior to that July 1st, 2021 date, we were conducting mission critical inspections, but they were done on a case-by-case basis, as well as remote regulatory assessments. So for the RRAs, the remote regulatory assessments, we were using those submitted records. We reviewed them to gain an understanding of the firm's current operational status. And these RRAs were not meant to replace an on-site FDA inspection. Instead, it provided us with information until the next on-site inspection could be performed. And for those firms that underwent an RRA, we utilized that information obtained, and it provided us with a more potential focused inspection. But as far as inspectional time, it stayed approximately the same, which is typically a 2-week period.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have another question for Ms. McAllister, and here is the question. What sort of trending data is FDA looking for during inspections? Does FDA want to see information about excursions?
So another great question. So first and foremost, we want to ensure that your firm has a sense of a level of control within your facility across a period of time. And this can be monitored in many different ways across all areas of your facility. It could be through EM data, water for injection data, the complaints you've received, any type of manufacturing deviations, out of specification results, etc. We expect to see excursions, but we're more focused on any trends that may be observed. So this allows for your quality unit, as well as an FDA investigator, to tell if your facility is in a state of control. It's crucial for your facilities to be able to respond appropriately when excursions do occur.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have one more question for Ms. McAllister, and here's the question. FDA has provided opportunities for firms to receive what we call a pre-operational audit. Can FDA comment on this offering?
Absolutely. So 503B outsourcing facilities can submit a formal request for a pre-op meeting to our compounding mailbox, and we evaluate this on a case-by-case basis. But during our pre-operational audits, we conduct a walkthrough of your facility, we'll ask questions, and we'll point out any observations that we may observe. We have also received these requests for pre-operational audits when certain states do not grant an outsourcing facility a license until we conduct an on-site inspection ourselves. And within those particular instances, we have worked in conjunction with both the outsourcing facilities and our state counterparts to ensure accommodations could be made.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. We're now moving on to our next panelist, Captain Canton, and here is the first question. How is FDA prioritizing inspections of
Yeah, we actually get that question a lot. We consider all inspections of compounding facilities to be a priority, but currently, as you might expect, due to the pandemic, we do have a higher than normal number of pending inspections. My office is working closely with ORA, the office that conducts inspections, attempting to prioritize all of the inspections that we have to do. And for-cause inspections and OAI follow-up inspections do receive a higher priority status. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question for Captain Canton. Does the FDA inspect outsourcing facilities as a matter of course or only when a problem is reported? And what is the frequency of the inspections?
Thank you for that question. All compounders that register with FDA as an outsourcing facility under Section 503B are inspected on a risk-based schedule. Our goal is to conduct outsourcing facility inspections on an annual basis. And if a significant problem is reported, we may also conduct for-cause inspections as well.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have one more question for Captain Canton, and this is the question. Regarding outsourcing facilities, how many have been referred to the Justice Department for producing illegal drug products?
I believe this question is about the number of injunctions that have involved outsourcing facilities. And to date, we have had 6 injunctions for outsourcing facilities.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving back to Ms. McAllister, we do have more questions coming in for Ms. McAllister, and here is the next question. Are 503B required to provide quarterly reports to their customers? And if so, what are the elements of the reports?
So thank you, Ray, for that question. So we as an agency do not have a requirement for outsourcing facilities to provide quarterly reports to their customers. But with that being said, your facility may create quality agreements, and you can mention that as a requirement within your quality agreement with that customer.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have another question for Ms. McAllister, and here is the next question. What are the EM expectations for 503B OF?
So that's a question we get a lot of times during our inspections as well. And for outsourcing facilities, you're required to follow 21 CFR 211 42C10-4. And that regulation states that control systems to prevent contamination during aseptic processing should include a system for monitoring environmental conditions. And that particular monitoring program should cover all production shifts. That includes the air, floors, walls, equipment surfaces, which include the critical surfaces that come in contact with product, container, and the closure systems.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have one more question for Ms. McAllister in this round, and here's the question. What are a few of the most common problems or deficiencies FDA observes when inspecting outsourcing facilities?
So that's another great question, Ray. And I did include this in my presentation. I think it was the last slide. And a few of the common deficiencies that we typically observe, like number one would be the system for monitoring environmental conditions. Number two is usually a failure to thoroughly review any unexplained discrepancies or a failure of a batch or even any of its components to meet its established specifications, whether that particular batch had already been distributed. And the third one that we typically see is the aseptic processing areas themselves are deficient regarding the systems for cleaning and disinfecting, whether it be the room or the equipment to produce aseptic conditions.
Thank you for responding to that question. We're going to now move back over to Captain Canton for the next few questions. And here's the first question. 503B compounding records and documents. How many years should we keep them?
Yeah, under 503B, there isn't really a specified time period required for maintaining and storing documents and records. However, under Section 503B, B5, an outsourcing facility does have to submit adverse event reports to FDA in accordance with the content and format requirements established through guidance or regulation under Section 310.305 of Title 21 CFR and 21 CFR 310.305G requires that a firm maintain certain records related to serious unexpected adverse events for 10 years and provide FDA access to those records. So that's really the only requirement for record keeping.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have another question for Captain Canton. Do we need to register with the State Board of Pharmacies in all states?
Section 503B does not require OFs to be a licensed pharmacy. However, many states do require outsourcing facilities to be state licensed. So a firm planning to register as an outsourcing facility should contact the applicable state boards of pharmacy to determine whether or not a state license is required for their home state and for any other states in which they intend to distribute compounded drug products. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We're now going to move back over to Ms. McAllister to try to get a couple more questions in before our time runs out. And here's the next question. When using the term outsourcing facilities, is the FDA only referring to 503Bs?
Thank you, Ray, for that question. Yes, when we refer to an outsourcing facility, that is indeed a 503B registered facility with our agency.
Thank you for responding to that question. Looks like we have about time for one more question, and this will be for Ms. McAllister. How can laymen access CGMP requirements such as 21 CFR 211?
Thank you, Ray, for that question. So in my opinion, the easiest way of going about accessing 21 CFR 211 would be to just type it into your web browser. And once you do that, you will see a link for accessdata.fda.gov. Go ahead and click on that and you'll be able to see all of 211. Thank you, Ray.
Well, thanks everyone for responding to all the questions that came in. The numerous questions, we weren't able to get to everyone, but we had quite a few. And certainly want to thank our speakers for the timely talk and doing a great job. And we do have a few